listening to Big World at Work.
Kai's Inquisition, The Blight of Shadowfall, Episode 9. Written and read by Tawn Krakowski. A cool breeze swept through the clearing, brushing away the golden hypnotic pollen that had allowed the creeper to so easily capture Jack. It drew her deeper into its vines and brambles, seeking to feast on her brain and transform her body until she became much like the two more man-like creepers who had followed Reynard into the fray. While the creature who held Jack had no discernible humanoid features, the newcomers were fresher, less plant-like, and still resembled what they had been before they had been turned. One wore red paint applied in patterns on what could be seen of its naked, desiccated chest above a blood and pollen-stained loincloth, while the other was clothed in soiled, tattered garb commonly worn by sailors, and was only recognizable as a creeper by the cheerful saffron flower blooming through an eye socket. Kai sidled into a prime position from which she could pelt all three creepers with arrows, just as Pia rushed the monstrosity holding Jack, walnut quarterstaff spinning aggressively. The scholar bellowed in a dark, abrasive language and slammed her staff down on the tendrils invading Jack's body in an apparent attempt to dislodge them. Her effort was rewarded with a slash across the neck from the creature's thorns and an instinctual tightening of the vines encasing its victim. Kai could feel the magic of Chajek's battle hymn coursing through her veins like fire, and assumed the others were bolstered in the same manner. She channeled that energy into her shots, and was able to successfully hit her target more often than not. Brivis, seemingly also inspired by the bard's tune, ran to intercept the more savage-looking creeper lumbering into the clearing after Reynard. Once she was within stabbing distance of her objective, however, she took a direct spray of pollen to the face, tripped when her feet became entangled in a web of vines, and ended up sprawled in the dirt before it like a supplicant praying to her god. Reynard managed to keep ahead of the newcomers despite the handicap of his extremely short legs. Once he noticed Brivis's plight, though, he reversed course and cartwheeled into a back handspring. His tiny, whirling figure finally came to rest with his borrowed dagger buried firmly into the painted chest of the savage. It convulsed and writhed in silence before it collapsed, appearing almost grateful for release and death. Kai took aim at the sailor, but when she loosed, the arrow went wide, barely missing the halfling in the process. She winced and tried again, this time scoring a solid hit in the creeper's empty socket opposite the sunny blossom. To her surprise, the hit soundlessly halted its progress, and it crumpled into a heap of detritus. Reynard slapped Brivis hard across the cheek to break the pollen's hold on her. She blinked a few times in confusion, snarled a sarcastic "thanks a lot" at her benefactor, and hopped nimbly to her feet. Together, the halfling and elf converged to join Pia against the remaining creeper, all working as a team to force the beast to free its captive. Once it was surrounded, the creeper released the warrior woman in order to better defend itself. Jack flopped to the grass, her eyes vacant, and her deep emerald lips glistening with saliva that had pooled just inside her mouth. Blood streamed lazily from her ears and nostrils, falling on her armor in a chaotic beat that provided an odd rhythm to the eerily quiet battle. Under the concerted assault of Pia, Reynard, and Brivis, the creeper's vines curled and blackened as another noxious plume of pollen puffed from its golden flowers in a desperate attempt to turn the tide. This time, however, the pollen's potency had degraded to the point that it had no effect. The trio offered little quarter as they hacked at the creature until nothing remained but a heap of shredded leaves and bones. With a final whack, Pia reduced the creeper to a tangled mass of brown, dead leaves. Chajek, now slightly hoarse, ceased his singing and frowned in disgust at Reynard, who was already sifting through the dead piles for whatever he could find. "Those compost heaps won't have any valuables?" the bard scoffed. "On the contrary, my little friend," Reynard quipped as he extracted a dagger encased in a jeweled sheath from the remains of the sailor. He carefully slid it from the case and tested its balance, strength, and edge as if he were a master jeweler examining an uncommonly large diamond. With a contented sigh he stowed the blade and fastened the sheath, which was clearly made to fit a larger individual's thigh, around his waist. "This will do nicely. 2 blades are better than 1 in my book." As soon as the danger was over, Pia began the process of tending to Jack's wounds. At Reynard's words, she turned and addressed him in the strange, gravelly language she had spoken during the battle. The halfling nonchalantly responded in the same tongue. Startled, Pia fired a barrage of words at Reynard, who simply shrugged. "What language is that?" Chajek demanded. "What are you two talking about?" Reynard strutted over to examine the savage's corpse with an obnoxious grin plastered across his face, but said nothing. Pia rolled her eyes and sighed. She then closed them, inhaled deeply, and slowly blew the air out through her nose. After several minutes of working to steady her breathing, Pia opened them again and gazed stonily at Chajek. "Can you understand me now?" she asked him. "Of course I can understand you when you're speaking common. What kind of fool do you take me for?" Chajek puffed out his chest indignantly and brushed imaginary dirt from his lapel. Pia looked at her hands uncomfortably. "I don't believe you to be a fool, Chajek. I merely forgot to mention that in return for my gifts as a seer, I am afflicted with certain difficulties." "What kind of difficulties?" Kai asked calmly as she gathered spent arrows that could be reused or salvaged and placed them in her quiver. "Well," Pia glanced at her nervously, "during the heat of battle, I can only speak in demonic." At the other's startled expressions, she rushed on. "Every oracle suffers from some sort of malady to balance the visions. My mother was followed by malevolent spirits. My grandmother was cursed with a wasting disease. I speak in tongues. Each oracle carries her burden in her own fashion. On occasion, I've been known to revert to demonic when I'm especially ill at ease." "Why, then, were you able to communicate in common while we were escaping the ocean wanderer?" Kai challenged. "I don't know," Pia answered. "It's not something I can control. Perhaps it was because I was not required to physically defend myself as we disembarked, or maybe a god or goddess intervened on my behalf. There is a precedent for such an occurrence." Jack interrupted the conversation with a feral grunt as she sat up and turned her face to the sky, sniffing loudly. Drool oozed from the corners of her lips, and her eyes stubbornly retained their glassy, vacant appearance. She abruptly dropped back to the ground and wiggled furiously, her face a mask of concentration as she rubbed her back on the grass. Brivis took a hesitant step back from Jack. "What's wrong with her? What is she doing?" "Looks like she's trying to scratch an itch," Reynard offered, his head cocked to the side and his mouth pursed in contemplation. Pia nodded. "I believe that is exactly what she is attempting. She seems to have lost some intellectual capability from her encounter with the creeper. That sort of damage is beyond my skill to repair, but I do not believe the effect is permanent. We will need a way to control her until she regains her faculties, though, as she will behave as a beast would in the interim. Are there any suggestions on how we might keep her from hurting herself or us?" "I have a certain rapport with animals," Kai stated grimly. "Many of Naderu's servants do. I can look after Jack." "You may want to use my manacles, too," Reynard suggested. "No offense, but Jack looks like she wouldn't break a sweat pummeling you into the next life." He tossed the handcuffs at Kai, who caught them effortlessly. She lifted an eyebrow at the thief. "Reynard has a point," Chajek told Kai. "Jack does look formidable. She may be more docile if she's chained." "I think it best, too," Brivis chimed in. "Here, Pia held out a hand, palm up. "I will chain her while you keep her calm." Kai watched Jack closely as she relinquished the manacles to the healer. She was rather large and strong. The fact that she was currently stalking a butterfly like a tiger cub did nothing to negate those facts. "So be it, but we must continue looking for Captain Rydal while Jack heals. Agreed?" "Agreed," the others replied in unison. When the group resumed their search, Kai held her trident defensively in one hand and a length of chain attached to Jack's restraints in the other. She kept to the rear of the procession and worked to minimize the echo of her ward's passage down the path. A few moments into their trek, Pia approached Kai, gently took the lead from her hand, and said sheepishly, "It's my fault that Jack is here. I should be the one to care for her. She's my responsibility." Kai slowed her pace and asked in a similar tone so that the others would not overhear, "How is her condition your fault?" Pia did not meet Kai's eyes. "I hired her to protect me on my journey. I have reason to believe there is a price on my head."
Music by Kevin MacLeod.
You're listening to Big World Network.